Ford Ranger Tremor has to be one of the most misunderstood Rangers amongst the Ford lineup. So it's not a Raptor and it's not a Wildtrak. So what is it? It's a Ford Ranger Tremor. So basically, this is a more off-road based vehicle that's based on the Ford XLT, right? That Ford has introduced. But not only that, it's not only a decal. Bear with me, right? So up front, you do get this lovely gloss black grille over here. But not only that, I'm sure you guys might have noticed that the fact that it does come with this performance LED headlights, of course, with the headlights that we've seen in the Wildtrak X, of which I must say these lights shine brighter than your future. Moving down below, we also do have a lovely metal bash plate over here, since this vehicle is very much off-road biased. So it only does the thing that you might have noticed the fact that, you know what, this vehicle is actually a bit taller or a bit higher than normal Rangers, right? So basically Ford has fitted this with the lovely Bilstein shock suspensions and stuff like that, so it kind of gives it a wider track and an increased ground clearance of about 24 millimeters, of which I must say, you know what, big ups to Ford for that, right? Moving along to the side, you might have noticed that this vehicle actually looks a bit beefier. It does of course come with these lovely all-terrain tires over here, of which I must say I really do like. Since this is of course based on the XLT, it does kind of somewhat look like an XLT. You do get this gloss black mirrors and door handles compared to the other ones, right? But not only that, right? What I do like is the fact that Ford actually gave us metal side steps for when you're going bundy bashing, and of course those rocks are gonna hit your side steps. So you know what, I really do appreciate the fact that Ford gave you metal side steps. But nonetheless, let's move along to the rear and let's talk about that. From a rear side perspective, it does look somewhat a bit washed out, right? Of course, we do have this lovely Tremor badging over here, or decals, of which I must say I do like. But nonetheless, we also do have this lovely side step, which is metal, by the way. Since this is of course based on the XLT, you do have a somewhat functional sports bar compared to the one that you get in the Wildtrak, right? But if there's anything that I say I would have really liked, back here you of course also do have this Tremor badging. But if there's anything that I say I would have really liked, much as this is light, I would have liked it if it was a bit spring-loaded. But not only that, one thing that I really do also appreciate on this side has to be the fact that, you know what, this vehicle was also rubberized, right? Compared to the one that we had, compared to the type of material that we had in the Platinum. But this material also does follow along into the interior, so let's get into that. Alright, so moving along inside, right? So since this is of course based on the XLT, let's just fire it up. Of course, it is a push button start, but nonetheless, man, it's like any typical Ford Ranger, right? Inside. So you do get this lovely digital cluster over here that has your fuel consumption and your various off-road screens, since this is of course the off-road based vehicle, right? Of course, you do have this lovely steering wheel with your cruise control settings and your audio buttons on the right. Right, moving along to the center screen has to be one of the places where I'd say I really do like. You know, you also do have this lovely towing settings over here, but not only that, we also have a place where we can actually see a backup trailer and our various off-road modes, of which I must say these lovely off-road screens do come in handy when you're of course maneuvering this big Tremor, right? As you guys might have noticed, the fact that it does not come with the fancy gear lever that you get in the Wildtrak, but nonetheless it's okay. You do of course have two cup holders and electronically operated handbrake over here, of which I must say really does feel nice. Materials on the other hand still somewhat feel a bit basic compared to the premium variants of the Ford Ranger, right? But not only that, you somewhat kind of feel special when you're sitting in this seats over here, because they do have this lovely Tremor stitching over here, of which to let everybody know that you're in of course a Tremor. But you know what, enough speaking about the interior, let's jump into the driving impressions and let me take you guys through that. Alright, so we're on the road with the Tremor, right? And right from the get-go, let's start off with the oily bits. How does this vehicle drive? So what powers this vehicle is a 2-liter bi-turbo engine that puts out 154 kilowatts and 500 newton meters of torque, and it sends all the power through a 10-speed box over here, of which I must say and I must commend Ford's 10-speed gearbox over here, right? It's really smooth. You barely notice you barely notice whenever it shifts and stuff like that. So for me, I'd say I really do like that, right? But overall driving impressions of this vehicle feels very lovely. You know, you sit high up and you get a better view of the road, and even off-roading, I guess this actually kind of helps when you're able to see the rocks and stuff like that. But not only that, you also do get a 360-degree surround camera system over here, where you can actually see where you're driving, right? Essentially, which is actually really a nice touch, right? But not only that, you know what? I feel like, you know what? As much as this vehicle is very off-road based, you don't really feel it. It's very easy for you to live with on a day-to-day. Obviously, you will get slightly a bit more road noise compared to your normal Wildtrak and stuff like that, right? So in that essence, then maybe yes, right? So what does this vehicle actually compete with, if you might look at it? But before we start with the competition, I feel like, as much as I said in the beginning that, you know what, this has to be the most misunderstood vehicle from Ford, this is why I say that, right? Because this vehicle sits in between the Wildtrak and it sits in between the Wildtrak and the Raptor, right? And pricing perspective, it's run about just over R1 million. Over R1 million. Looking at that alone in itself just kind of like puts me off, because over R1 million for something that's essentially an XLT, right? With a few goodies here and there. Why don't you just, if you don't really need the off-road capabilities and stuff like that, personally I'd say you're better off with the Wildtrak, right? You get a whole lot of safety systems in the Wildtrak. So, but even in this one, you do get a whole lot of safety systems like adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist, rear traffic collision assist, and stuff like that, which is really nice to have. This vehicle also does have tank turn, right? The trail turn. So basically what it does, it locks the rear wheel, and then to make your turning circle or your turning radius quite a bit shorter, of which that's really nice. I really do appreciate that from Ford, right? But not only that, oops, I think things are just rattling about. But if there's anything that I'd say, the Ford claims saying 7.5 liters per 100 Ks, right? In terms of fuel consumption. Trust me, I haven't seen anything close to that. The nearest I've seen I've been bouncing between 9.5 and 10.5. Sometimes when pushing it, you do see figures of 11.5 liters per 100 Ks, right? And for me, that's a bit steep, but for a bakkie, it's not too much. So this vehicle basically competes with the Mitsubishi Extreme that we had earlier on. And what else? I'm just trying to think, man. What else? I think the Warrior, the Nissan Navara Warrior, it also competes with this one. And of course, the famous one, the GR, right? Yes, people might say the GR kind of like competes with the Raptor. Nah, not really. Because the Raptor kind of like outpowers it when it comes to power and performance, right? But nonetheless, man, this is really such a solid product. I really enjoyed my time in Ford's, like in this unit. It really made my time in this vehicle so lovely. I'm just a bit sad the fact that this 2-liter bi-turbo engine might be phased out. I think Ford has hinted something along the lines of a 2.3 turbo engine. So I'm not too sure, man. I'm really not too sure about that, because this is such a tried and tested engine over here that Ford has been using for Lord knows when. But nonetheless, man, I'm CJ from 6K Wheels, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.